Have you ever just looked around and wondered, why are we all so different? I mean, really different. Why do some people absolutely love the spotlight, while others would rather, do literally anything else? What's the deal with that one friend who's always optimistic no matter what, and another who's super cautious? It's one of the most basic questions about being human, and today we're going to dive into the science that's trying to figure it all out.
And you see this everywhere, right? Especially when you look at public figures. Think about it. Why are their reactions to the exact same pressures so wildly different? These aren't just random little quirks. Nope, they're consistent patterns. And those patterns are exactly what the science of personality psychology is all about: understanding, explaining, and even predicting them. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big questions the field is asking right now. Then we'll break down the 4 key building blocks of personality. We're also going to bust a major myth about it, see how your personality actually shapes your life, and finally, we'll put all the pieces of the puzzle together. For the longest time, personality psychology was kind of dominated by these grand, sweeping theories. Think Freud and Jung. But over the last few decades, the whole field has had this incredible renaissance. It's moved past all those old debates and is now laser-focused on answering 4 really core questions about who we are. So modern personality science really has 4 main jobs on its to-do list. First, just define what personality even is. Second, figure out how it develops over our lifetime. Third, understand the mechanics of how it actually works. And finally, use all that knowledge to understand a whole person. These 4 goals are going to be our guide today. So let's jump in with that first job. What is personality? Well, today's researchers see it as being made up of 4 distinct but totally related parts. You can think of this as the modern toolkit for really understanding a person. First up, we've got traits. This is probably the part you've heard of before. Traits are just our consistent patterns, how we tend to think, feel, and act. And what's so cool here is the Big 5 model. Before this, it was chaos. Psychologists had literally thousands of words to describe people, but no shared language. The Big 5 was a total game changer, giving them a common, scientifically backed framework to talk about our general tendencies. But what we tend to do is only part of the story, right? We also have motivations. This is the why behind what we do. It's all about our desires, our deepest values, our life goals. It's the engine that's driving our behavior, whether we're totally aware of it or not. And this brings up another really key distinction. Traits are not the same as skills. Think of it like this. A trait is your default setting, your tendency. A skill, on the other hand, is a capacity. It's something you're capable of doing if you need to. So for example, a student might be naturally introverted. That's their trait, but they can still learn the skills to be an awesome leader for a class project. It just might drain their battery a bit. One is your autopilot, the other is a tool you can pick up and use. And the final building block is what we call our narrative identity. This one's a little deeper. This is the story you tell yourself about yourself. It's how you take all the scattered pieces of your life, your past, your present, your hopes for the future, and weave them into a story that makes sense and gives your life meaning. It's basically your personal myth. Okay, so now we have the building blocks. Let's talk about how they develop. Because one of the biggest myths out there is that your personality is basically set in stone by the time you're an adult. But, spoiler alert, decades of research show us a much more dynamic and, frankly, more interesting truth. So what are we? Are we like a rudderless ship, just battered and changed by every little thing that happens to us? Or are we like a cement jetty, completely unmoving and fixed for life? Well, the research is crystal clear. We are neither. The reality is this fascinating mix of incredible consistency and real, meaningful change. Let's look at that consistency part first. It turns out our personality traits get more and more stable as we get older. This means that if you're the most extroverted person in your friend group as a teenager, you're probably still going to be the most extroverted one when you're 40. That stability really peaks after about age 25, giving us this consistent core to who we are. But, and this is a big but, here's the other side of that coin. We also change. And often we change in response to major life experiences. Things like getting a promotion at work, getting into a serious relationship, even traveling abroad. All of these things are linked to real shifts in our personality over time. So we're both stable and we're capable of growth. It's not one or the other. So we know what personality is, and we know it can change and develop, but So what? What does it actually do? Well, it turns out your personality is one of the most powerful predictors of how your entire life is going to unfold.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting. We tend to think that things like your family's income or your IQ are the huge predictors of success in life. But check this out. The data shows that personality traits are often just as powerful and sometimes even more powerful at predicting everything from how well you'll do at your job to your physical health to whether your marriage will last. This leads to a massive question, doesn't it? If personality is that important, are we just stuck with the hand we were dealt? Or can we actually do something about it? Can we change it on purpose? And the answer, from a huge review of over 200 different studies, is a resounding yes. Clinical interventions like therapy have been shown again and again to produce real, significant changes in personality traits, especially things like emotional stability. And the best part? These changes often stick around long after the therapy is over. Personality is absolutely a workable target for change. So, how in the world does that work? It's not some kind of magic. A broad trait like being highly conscientious doesn't just mystically lead to good grades. It works through specific behaviors. A conscientious person is more likely to set effective goals and develop tenacious study habits. And it's those actions that actually lead to the better grades. See, there's a clear pathway. Okay, deep breath. We've seen the building blocks, we've seen how they develop, and we've seen how they predict our lives. Now for the final step. Let's put all the pieces of this puzzle together and see how this whole framework helps us understand a complex, real-life person. Psychologist Dan McAdams used this exact framework to analyze recent presidents, and it's fascinating. A quick look here shows you that you just can't understand these figures by looking at one piece. For example, George W. Bush's high extroversion combined with his powerful redemptive life story, his narrative about overcoming alcoholism, really shaped his leadership style. On the flip side, Trump's very different mix of traits, motives, and narrative created a completely different presidency. Let's look a little closer at the analysis of Donald Trump. You start with his trait profile. Very high in extroversion, very low in agreeableness. That's a classic profile associated with narcissism. But it's not the whole story. You have to add in his core motivation, this deep, unyielding need for admiration. And then you wrap it all in what McAdams called an episodic narrative identity. Not a life story about growth, but more like a series of daily battles that need to be won. And this leads us to a really powerful final point from this whole analysis. The case of the Trump presidency seems to show that a strong personality isn't just an internal thing. It can become an external force, a force powerful enough to actually bend the traditions, the institutions, and even the people around it. So, where does that leave us? We've seen that personality is the stable core of who you are, but it's also changeable. It powerfully shapes your life, but it can also be shaped by you. Which brings us to the ultimate question we can ask ourselves. Knowing all this, what parts of your own story, of your own personality, are you actively writing right now?